is the Athletic Football Show.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I guess I got some homework in for a pod we'll be doing at a later date, because is this our first like emergency pod, like our emergency live pod?
I think it might be, because we don't do a lot of emergency pods because we record every day.
I know.
So back in a time where I didn't do this every day, sometimes you had to break in case of emergency and be like, all right, it's time to react to this because we're not recording till Wednesday. That's not really how it works over here on the Athletic Football Show. But for the first time that I can remember, it usually happens the other way, where we finish recording. It's like 4:18 p.m. It's like, man, that was a mediocre show. Good job. And then 20 minutes passes and some huge piece of news breaks. And it's like, well, what are we going to do now? The show's already out. And is it worth going to do this? The exact opposite happens. We're sitting there getting ready to record a podcast about a topic that is not worth bringing up because we will discuss it later. And we get two huge bombshells immediately in a row. Boom, boom. And then that show goes in the shitter. And now we have to do this one. So good stuff.
Yeah, it's dominoes. I think literally the first podcast we ever did, it happened to us because we did an NFC North preview. And then the Vikings traded for Yannick
Ngakoue.
And I remember you guys were like, hey, we got to re-record. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever you guys need me to do. Sure, I'll talk about it. But that was a peek behind the curtain for the first time for me. But I know usually it's like 5 minutes into a show, a news breaks, or like you said, 20 minutes after. So this is great. But it felt like dominoes were getting set up. Like literally there's that meme with the dominoes that like I just tweeted, but there was also just everything else that falls in the NFL season. I mean, this is every sports league. So as soon as that Sean Payton news happened, it's like, oh, here we go. Now the bubble's about to burst. There's no dead weeks in the NFL. This is the bye week before the Super Bowl. News break. Here we go. Now we got coaching news. Senior Bowl's happening. I'm sure more is going to trickle down from that. So it's great that we're primed for this and ready to go.
So let's talk about this from the Broncos perspective. Let's start with the Sean Payton news. The Broncos trade reportedly a 2023 first and a 2024 second and get back a 2024 third for the rights to hire Sean Payton as their head coach. Am I wrong just to think this is a huge win for the Broncos?
I mean, they're already all in, like with the Russ thing. I mean, they had to make this work. So yeah, I mean, this isn't originally what the compensation was going to be. And even just getting that pick swap isn't like, I mean, that's actually, it kind of softens the blow.
Really just becomes that 2023 first. So you traded Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton.
Yes. And that's exactly what it is. Considering what the price was, what I pictured in my head, that's not bad at all. Especially where they were at.
First round picks.
Yeah.
And I know people were saying that, and it's hard to sit there and be like, man, multiple first round picks for a coach when you can just hire a coach. Coaches are really important.
Right. And look
it's really important. So the idea that you're only giving up one first round pick, I know it's a lot. I know first round picks are important.
Yes.
But you're getting a coach who has built a winner every single year. And I can't remember who it was, it's a study that's come up a lot recently with talking about coaching hires. And I believe it's someone who is now maybe in the Eagles front office or the Browns front office that was in the analytics community. And they did a study on the predictive aspects of head coach success. And your success as a coordinator really has no bearing on whether or not you will be a successful head coach.
Yeah.
But if you have been a head coach and you've been successful, it typically indicates that you will be successful again. Think about what Andy Reid has done for the Chiefs. How many first round picks would you give up if you were Kansas City for Andy Reid and what he's given you?
Yeah.
Way more than one.
I was going to say at least two. And I mean, remember what the Chiefs were right before Andy Reid got there? They were an absolute shit show. And then they got Andy Reid. They traded for Alex Smith, and then boom, boom, instant double-digit wins. Like they just boom, boom, just like that. And that's what a head coach does. It starts at the top. That's always the saying, but it matters more than any other sport. There's so much that you have to manage as a head coach. So getting one that not only is a good organizer, identifier of talent as well. That's an underrated thing with Sean Payton, but also on top of it, he's a really one of the original quarterback gurus. And he's going with a guy that needs all the help that he can get right now just to rebuild confidence and also just align their offense and get it pointed into the right direction. So I think that's a huge win. You're all in. You already made your bed with the Russell Wilson trade. So why not? Like, this is a great way to like really get as much return as you can on that investment.
In Rappaport reporting now that the Broncos tried to lure DeMeco Ryans there today. Wow. He said no, and they move on to Sean Payton. We had this discussion with Ando yesterday. If they miss out on DeMeco Ryans and Sean Payton is no longer in the picture, where do they go?
Right.
Jim Harbaugh? Do they go back into the pool and start interviewing people again?
Right.
I know you probably had to give up a ton for him, and that's before we even get into a conversation about compensation per year, which I assume is astronomical. I can't even imagine what he's making, but also power dynamics.
Yes.
That is another big question with this. I'm guessing he's reporting directly to ownership. George Payton was there. Yeah. George Payton is probably on a little shakier ground now after the Russell Wilson trade. So the power dynamics within the organization and how much you're willing to pay him, all up for debate and all up for, we could talk about that. But it's still, I think that the end result here of Sean Payton is now your head coach, when you were looking at having to go back to the drawing board, that is a win to me. That is a definitive win.
Remember, I've said this kind of line a million times with team building. Like, sometimes going from shit to average is still like a great improvement. Now imagine going from, way, way poor to very good and anyway, excellent and a head coach. That's a huge bump. And like you said, the pool, it was, it was an interesting pool. Eye of the beholders. Like, Ryans was probably one of the aces of this kind of class, of this head coaching class, I guess is the incoming coaching class. So you lose out on him. All right, we already did Hackett. Never again. We don't want to go down that path, getting that kind of proven guy. But Sean Payton, I mean, obviously this is the line, from Game of Thrones, like chaos is a ladder. For him, I'm sure he loved being able to go like, oh, I could go straight to the owner who probably has final say on roster construction, like the final 53 and all that. That probably meant a lot to him, where he was like, yeah, I want to go there. And okay, I can make this work with Russell Wilson as well.
I want to be clear. I don't think that having to go back into the pool and look at, let's throw some names out there, Brian Callahan, if he didn't get a job, somebody's got a little bit further down the list, that can work out. Mm-hmm. That has worked out. Mm-hmm. We have no idea which of these coordinators are going to be head coaches. So getting one a little bit further down the process, Frank Reich was the second choice of the Colts. For as bad as the end there was, Frank Reich did a pretty solid job. The fact he was out of work for about 6 weeks, and
Sirianni wasn't the Eagles.
What Sirianni was for the Eagles. This happens all the time. So I think that's okay. I think it's more from an optics perspective than anything else, that now, instead of having to be like, oh man, we struck out on all the guys we wanted to talk to, now you get what a lot of people consider to be the crown jewel of this process. And the only sense that I got for why people were a little bit apprehensive about hiring Sean Payton is the compensation involved from both the draft pick perspective, what he was going to make, and what he would demand for his standing in the building. But if you're willing to acquiesce to those things because you're operating sort of from a position of weakness, which I think the Broncos kind of are, I think this is ultimately a pretty good end result.
Yeah, they went from, I mean, a day ago or 2 days ago, Woody Page is cracking jokes saying like this, he was their third number one choice, DeMeco Ryans. Like they're saying like, oh no, that's our number one guy. They just kept striking out on it. But the fact, so going from that with a pie on their face a little bit to now having the ace of this class, I mean, that's huge. Like you said, the optics, and we're going to talk about the other news too in a sec, but like that matters. That builds a lot of collateral. That's like, oh wow, confidence in an organization that desperately needs it right now. I mean, watching that Broncos team the second half of the year, they need it, and they knew that they're coming back with that quarterback again. So I think just as a showing face type of thing, this is huge for them, especially with a new ownership group that wants to probably make a splash and say like, we got the guy, and we're going to show that we're going to have the resources to do it.
If you're trying to win a press conference in this year's head coaching cycle, I think the easiest way to win the press conference is trot out the guy with the Super Bowl ring.
I think so too.
Right. And somebody who built a consistent contender in the NFC for a very, very long time. I know Drew Brees was a huge part of who the Saints were, but if you look at their finishes on offense by DVOA over like Sean Payton's entire tenure, like 15 years, they're in the top 5 every year. There's just no better way to be a successful NFL franchise than have a top 5 to top 7 offense every single season. Right. And you have a guy who was an architect of one for a decade and a half, who rebuilt an entire franchise. Think about where the Saints were when Sean Payton took over the Saints.
Right.
It's so easy to think of them as this really successful, stable organization that's consistently relevant and a winner. That was not the case when Sean Payton took over the Saints. So I just feel like if I were a Broncos fan, I would be absolutely thrilled.
They're the Aints.
I would be over the moon. It's not my money.
No,
Who
right?
I know. Shit.
I know. Oh, he made $12 million, and
oh, I bet it's way more than 12.
Oh, I'm sure.
I bet it's way more than 12. But again, it's not. Who cares? It's not your money. There is. What do you lose if you have the most expensive head coach in the league? He absolutely carries that weight within the building, which I guess can lead to some issues with dynamics. But there's no opportunity cost for coaches when your owner is like the 20th richest person in the world. Who cares?
Right. And also, it's like, what's the difference between $3 million more to a head coach? Say if he sets the market $3 million higher than another head coach, or a bunch of undrafted free agents, or a guy that you cut that's $2 million. Like you said, it's the owner's money. Who gives a shit? And also, he has that clout to justify it. There's only a few guys where it's like, well, yeah, he deserves that contract. Well, that's kind of actually, I think it helps and enables even more. If you just don't even recognize the name or think that has standing, it's like, well, highest paid guy, you kind of have to follow that as well. That all matters. It's like you said, it's an optics thing that matters. They're throwing the ace card down, just going like, this is the ace of spades, and we paid for it too. But that's what we are. We're a first class organization. This is what we do. That's
exactly right. And I think the Broncos see themselves that way. And this is not Pat Bowlen's Broncos anymore. And I think that being able to kind of send that message is important organizationally. Think about that Thursday night game and what it felt like.
Oh, I know.
When they played the Colts. Think about what that stadium
was a joke.
Like. The Penners being there for the first time and that ownership group sitting there and watching that happen. This is an overcorrection from that moment and an important one, in my opinion. I've told this story a bunch of times, but I was in New Orleans a decent amount in like 2017, 2018. Every time that they were semi-relevant and they were playing a playoff game, I rose my hand to take a trip down there. It's my favorite city in America. I absolutely love it. My bachelor party is going to be there. I love it.
Super Bowl's there in 2 years.
Listen, it's my favorite place. So I remember talking to Zach Lyon, who is the fullback on those teams. And we were talking about Sean Payton and the way that practices are structured. Yeah. And he was telling me a story about, I can't remember who it was, whether it was Traquan Smith or Michael Thomas or somebody. And Sean Payton there were landmarks during practice. When he was telling him about a route depth, he'd literally go out and he'd put his hat there. And that's how it was every single time. And the meetings that they would go through with Drew Brees, like these famous dot meetings that they would have on Saturday nights, where they would go through every single play, every single one, and talk about, well, how much do you like this? Why do you like this? What about in this situation? And they would dot the ones that they liked. And this collaborative, all-in effort to shape the offense and every single detail about what the offense was. And I know that having Drew Brees is great, but what they were able to do with personnel and just everything over that 10 or 15 years, if you're looking for a stabilizing force for that side of the ball, I can't really imagine a better one who would be available. I can only say it so many different ways.
I mean, and just even think about like late career Brees and when he got banged up and he was starting Teddy Bridgewater and even Taysom Hill a little bit. Yes. And they didn't miss a beat, and he changed the offense. He tweaked it just a little bit. Okay, Teddy's a little better at these types of throws. Okay, it wasn't anything like remodeled the whole offense, but just little tweaks. And
look at Jameis's numbers last year before he got hurt.
Yes, another one. Yes, launching him. Oh, but that's what he is. He understands the NFL. Like there's a strength to that. That's a gift. That's a really thing that you build around. Our head coach can see the game and understands how to use these guys. He finds different guys to run his little weak side choice that he's always going to run, but a different guy's running. It's Darren Sproles. It was Kamara. Jared Cook was in there running.
Michael
Thomas. Like he was revamped. There's a couple of years where Jimmy Graham is just catching fade balls in the red zone. And then how many have you seen that in a decade from the Saints? No, but he understood that Jimmy Graham's really good at it. So why change this up? And you look at the Broncos roster, and we've talked about this for about 2 years now, is that there's a lot of interesting dudes on that team. There's some guys that he can really work with, especially at the receiver room. They're getting Tim Patrick back along with Sutton and Judy. Greg Dulcich is interesting. You know who I compare Greg Dulcich to coming in the draft? Jared Cook. Wow, that's kind of fun. But I mean, there is just it's interesting. I think he could really right this ship. This guy understands, this guy being Sean Payton, understands how to run an NFL offense, and he's changed what the Saints did over the years. And another thing too is early career Saints offenses with Drew Brees was heavy play action, shot plays with a strong run game. You know who is good at heavy play action and should always lean into it? Russell Wilson. It's at that, and Russ is going to love that. Russ loves Drew Brees. So instantly, I bet you they're going to just boom right then and there. I think, and also Russ is going to go, oh, I want to run empty. And Sean Payton goes, no, this is what we're going to, having clout as the head coach, that, and quarterbacks get a lot of say with stuff, but you have a head coach that gets a lot of say too. Like that matters as well for that dynamic too.
Hackett came in last summer, said it to me, said it to a bunch of people. It's going to be what Russ likes. I'm not sure it's going to be what Russ likes this time around. I am fascinated by what the conversation was about him, about how tied they are to him.
Yeah.
Do I need to fix him? Is this a long-term thing?
Right.
I think if you go out and hire Sean Payton, it's a long-term thing. I have to imagine. And we'll see what the results are with Russ in the short term, but also how long they're going to be tied to him with Sean Payton now there.
You're talking about
Russell Wilson was the most prominent person in the building.
Yeah.
Last summer. When they traded for Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl ring. He has one of the highest contracts in the league. They made that massive trade to go get him. Again, the power dynamics shift now. Yes. He has a GM who's in his first year in the first go around. Yep. He has a head coach who's never done this before. Now that changes. It changes in a big way.
Yes. When you're talking about the Hackett thing, it made me think there's a Vince McMahon quote where he's yelling at the crowd and he's like, "You don't know what you like. You like what I tell you you like." And it's and I feel like that's what Sean Payton's going in there to do. But that is such a great point. Talking about the GM who made an all-in move, more or less, for this guy, for Russell Wilson. They enabled him. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that every dynamic of every building in the NFL is so wildly different between owner, GM, head coach, and quarterback. Those are really the big names, the big faces, and every team's different. But going in, it's like, this is going to be Sean Payton's show, because I bet you they're going to enable him as much as possible.
On the Saints side of this, what a huge win for the Saints to get this first round pick for him.
It's not even their head coach right now. This is great.
Because I believe that if this had gone another cycle, they get nothing for him. Correct? Mm-hmm. If it goes into next year.
Yep.
So to get a first round pick for him, especially when you consider the spot that the Saints were in. Spoiler alert. We were going to do something today about the QB carousel for this spring. Yeah. And we were looking at, how concerned are you for some of these situations? I was looking at the Saints. I was like, oh shit. They have no money. Yep. They had no first round pick. Yep. They have an urgency because they have the oldest roster in the league by snap weighted age. They have, I think, a real desire to be pretty good right away. How many avenues to a quarterback do you have if you're New Orleans? The answer is one more now, because you have that first round pick. Now you're in the mix.
Yes.
If whoever you want to go get, now you have at least as much ammo as most of these other teams who might be in the quarterback market. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're New Orleans. I understand the money is going to be tough to do this, but they also have money in the couch cushions. You can now make a call about Aaron Rodgers, right? In a way you probably couldn't before this happens.
Right. And also just getting, like you said, it's just resources. It's just ammo. It gives you avenues. It's all about avenues. That's what team building is in the NFL. It's just not the Saints, especially last year, were like, we're doing this with this roster and we're competing. It's like, really? That's okay. You're going to triple down on that path. Okay. But now, like you said, it just gives them avenues. It gives them ammo, resources, another second rounder to work with, even though it's kind of like the little pick swap kind of thing, but still that matters. I don't
think they have their 2024 second rounder. I'm pretty sure the Eagles have their 2024 second rounder.
That's amazing.
That's not a joke. I think that's
right. I know. I think you're right too. But hey, they recouped it. They figured out that now they have that in the back pocket. And that matters. Doesn't matter.
The Eagles have the Saints 2024 second round pick.
Oh my God. Way to go, Howie. Take a bow. God. But no, it's they needed it. They need as much resources as they can. We always know it's the joke with the cap with them, but the fact that they've kind of went nuclear on their picks, like they need to build up the war chest somehow. It's a team that desperately needs to figure out more avenues, because right now the path they were going on looked like another 7-10 kind of year where they're just kind of there.
Just quick preview. when you were thinking about Saints and quarterback marriages, who was coming to mind for you in the old world before this pick existed?
Like call Teddy back up, Jacoby Brissett, like kind of like finding one of those kind of middle tier guys that you can just patchwork to get through 2023. That's how I viewed it. That's kind of how what do you look at their cap and you're like, oh shit. Like how
you can't look at that though.
I know, because
they would bite so many bullets. I mean, there are ways they can. Nick Underhill, who does a very good job covering the Saints for his own website, it's called NewOrleansFootball.com. If you guys are Saints fans and have not subscribed or don't check it out, I think he does a great job.
Got a lot of people that do a great job covering the team.
Great beat.
I know.
Always have. So I was looking at it today, and he was breaking down how they can free up like $60 million in space, and a lot of it looks insane.
Yeah.
It's converting Cam Jordan, who's 33 years old. Most of his base salary to a signing bonus and prorating it over like 5 years. You think, oh, they would never do that. Don't say that about the Saints. Don't say they would never do that. They tried to go get Deshaun Watson a couple of years ago with the no money that they had. So I don't want to overstate how many levers the Saints would pull in order to get one of these things done. I'm
using the same Google Doc because that's how boom, we just did this. I think I have one note on them, and it says, how worried should we be about them scale to 1 to 10? I just said 9, but that's us. Like, you don't know how they feel about everything. Like, you don't know how they feel. Like, because a year ago, they felt great. It looked like they made a move like for Olave, and it's like, oh, wow, they're acting like that was the cherry on top. So you don't know what's going on in New Orleans. Like, it's hard to predict what that team wants to do. Mickey Loomis wants to do.
Every single Saints fan, we're like, man, that's giving up a lot, and we love Chris Olave. This is the most pro Chris Olave conversation and podcast in America.
Finalists.
Okay, every single time a Saints fan would push back on them having no picks, but we're going to trade Sean Payton for a bunch of stuff. That was always part of the calculus, and now it gets to be part of the calculus. Now you actually traded Sean Payton for a first-round pick, and it gives you one more little asset to play with as you're trying to figure out who your quarterback is, and as you're trying to squeeze everything you can out of what is, despite their protests over the last year or so, an aging roster. Okay. Let's get to the next head coaching.
Sorry. Everybody's in denial about their age, like all of us in real life, but the Saints especially. Like, I mean, just me and you were like, oh yeah, we're 33 or 34. Oh shit. But 35. Okay. But them, they're like, they do not want to hear their age. They're just like, no, 30 is the new 20, guys. That's the Saints roster permanently.
All right. Next big piece of news. The Texans have reportedly hired DeMeco Ryans as their next head coach, a 6-year deal. Good for him. That's exactly what I would have asked for after the last few tenures and how they went.
It's probably longer than any contract he got there as a player.
It's a great outcome for the Texans.
Yes.
When you think about the discourse around the Texans for the last couple of years and how it was hard to look at them and have any other takeaway other than, what are they? What is the plan? Where are they going? It didn't seem like they had any discernible direction, any discernible identity, any cohesion whatsoever in how this thing was being built. And some of that is understandable, right?
Yeah.
Nick Caserio comes in. This is a 3-year at minimum rebuild. The floor fell out the bottom of this thing, and you didn't have any picks.
Right.
Like, that combination is unfathomable. Okay. But they're starting to kind of get out of that now. They have a bunch of draft capital. They have the second pick in the draft. Hell yes. And they have it in a year where there are multiple quarterbacks available.
Yep.
So even with all of the messiness over the last 2 years, and it was awful. Like, the way that they handled it, and what happened with Culley and Lovie Smith is just, it's a terrible look, and it's not a good situation by any stretch. But now it's a much softer landing spot. And they got a guy that I think a lot of teams would have loved to be their head coach. He was on a lot of lists, justifiably. He's one of the most exciting candidates in this entire pool, in this entire cycle, and they got him. And I think that has to feel like a huge win for Nick Caserio and that entire organization.
I mean, just think, like you said, just think about where this team was at with the Deshaun Watson stuff, Jack Easterby, like, oh my God, back-to-back 1-year head coaches. And now they're bringing back a guy that, as a player, won Rookie of the Year for the Texans. He was their 3rd ever Pro Bowler in franchise history. Like that matters for, really. We forget how young of a franchise it is. It's only 21 years old, and I think it's a franchise that needed good vibes. And also it's like this, they're planting their foot and going like, this is our path now. We are finally, after 2 years and just wandering the wilderness of the NFL. This is us. We're finally deciding what our identity is going to be. I think it's great. The fact that DeMeco Ryans turned down the Broncos because he was like, no, I'd rather go with the Texans. Also kind of shows you what's going on in Denver right now. But also kind of like the fact that he was like, I would rather pick Houston than that. Okay.
Houston's a blank slate.
Yes, he can do what he wants. And I think they've kind of sorted out their kind of hierarchy on their team. The roster still, it's it's holy. But like you said, they have their picks now. This is a team that now it really feels like if last year they moved on, like if we just ignore what happened the last 2 years, it's like, oh yeah, they got their young head coaches, got a lot of picks, they got rid of their franchise quarterback. Okay, cool. This is what they can do now. But again, he's young, he played in the league, he's got name recognition. That all matters for a team that's so young. I mean, he's probably like the 6th best Texan of all time. Might as well that really helps a fan base that is, I mean, look at the crowds that were happening in Houston this past year. There people were doing this is the crowd at kickoff kind of tweets. Never want that if you're in charge of a team.
Why would you be excited? Why would you give a shit about that team and like what they were doing this year? They rolled into the season, and no offense to him, but with Davis Mills as their quarterback, it was another punted year.
It was a shrug.
This is the opposite of punting on your franchise, is going out and getting a guy like this.
Just plant your foot. They shrugged through the last 2 years. That's what they did. And I think this matters. And I think he's got a couple interesting defensive players, young guys. They nailed Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley last year. Stingley kind of battled some injuries, but those guys are valid starters. He can build this team. If he has a say in things, they can build it how they want to build it. And now they have a voice and a guy that really seems to know what he wants. You watch that 49ers team. Yes, they had talented players. They were so freaking well coached, and they adapted to who they were playing against every week. That's not an accident. It's not like Fred Warner's going in there and going like, this is what I want the game plan to be. Wow, look at that. It's DeMeco Ryans getting with his players, and you can see how much they respect him. You could see how people talk about
reactions that come at him coming off the sideline and him. Dude, just like the entire vibe of their sideline every single game. I want a piece of that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I want a piece of that. I want that energy. I want that, especially for a team that needs every ounce of it that they can get. But like you're saying, the energy on the sideline, you would see some third down blitz hit or something happen, a sack or something, and they all go straight up to him. And you could tell it's because he talked about that play they ran. Like that's usually the reaction. You always see, the Rodgers point, when he does that, like when he wants to give someone credit, like, oh yeah, like that. But like that, you could see that with the players. Like when they had a big play, they went to him going like, hey, that worked. Like you could tell it was that reaction. What we talked about on Wednesday worked in the game. Wow, way to go, coach. Thanks. That's awesome. And that's what you want it's going to be a young team. I'm sure it will be. You want a younger coach that can build that up. And I really do think this was a home run for them. I think this is the best case for where the Texans are at right now.
I think Kyle Shanahan has done a pretty good job over the last 5 years, and honestly, even earlier than that, if you want to give him credit for building some of those staffs or helping build some of those staffs in Washington.
Right. For
identifying coaching talent. That he got the job in 2017. DeMeco Ryans was immediately on the Niners staff. Mm-hmm. He was a quality control coach in 2017. In 6 years, he went from quality control coach to head coach of the Texans. And every single step along the way, he has shown why he deserves to be on that track. So I'm excited, man.
The fact that he trusted him, this is a real thing. You see a lot of former players, they get their first job in the NFL, and it's assistant receiver coach, assistant linebacker coach, not quality control. You know why? That shows DeMeco Ryans. That usually is a little more computer work. That's what I did, guys. It's a lot of data work. It's a lot of grunt work, drawing cards. You're doing a lot of the stuff so the other coaches can do their work. The fact that he made him that meant this guy's freaking smart. Yeah. This guy actually, he's not just a former player that knows what he's doing, a former Pro Bowl player that knows what he's doing, rookie of the year. He actually knows how to do the dirty work and actually understands what goes into that. That speaks a lot. That it really does. That the fact that he trusted him to have that type of role. I know that sounds backwards. Well, why would a lower role be more trusting? There's a lot that goes into that. And the fact that they say, no, this guy's intelligent enough to do that. That's huge. That's a huge check mark for him.
I wonder who the offensive coordinator is going to be. I wonder what he's going to do to build that side out, because That Niners staff is picked over, man.
Oh no, does he bring Anthony Lynn?
There's not even a Mike LaFleur at this point
No.
to kind of bring with him like there was when Robert Saleh took that job.
That's a great point. I know, who would he bring? And that's the thing. It's not like his coaching networking is huge. Like it's
obviously there's some guys, like if you want to bring like a Bobby Slowick, or obviously Anthony Lynn does have experience.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like Anthony Lynn will be the call.
Again, he's done it before.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Wheelster. Keep Pep Hamilton around.
Or you want to do that. That's whatever the answer ends up being. I'm curious because again, when you are a defensive minded head coach, that is the big question. What are you going to do on that side of the ball to make sure that you're creating stability, continuity? If that guy gets hired away, do you have a staff that you feel really good about? We've seen that. I mean, think about the Bills. I think some people don't think he did a good job, but I think Ken Dorsey did just fine this year when Brian Daboll moved on. And like, can you make sure that you create that ecosystem on that side of the ball? And obviously the offensive place they come from has a ton of success, but it's just a little bit picked over by now. A lot of those guys have
been cherry picked.
You know, like now we're down to Bobby Slowick and whoever like is down the list of their assistants, which is a little bit different than it was when Saleh took that job.
You also want that it does matter to nail in that hire, like you said, because he is a defensive head coach, is if they draft a QB this year, like want that OC to have some, like you are trusting OC to develop this guy and also be his guy, because you don't want all of a sudden we switched OCs up after a year and it's the guy we didn't even draft. Oh man, I had a 3rd round grade on this guy. Now I have to coach him up. Like having that input matters a lot too, as far as starting well, as far as team building.
What do you, other than the young defensive backs, you like, what's his last name that I can't pronounce? Okoronkwo?
Yeah, but I think he's gone.
Is he gone? Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They have a fresh slate. I mean, you look at this roster, there's not a lot that goes past 2023 and even 2024. You know, Brandon Cooks, the one receiver, and then they got John Mechie back. You know, he went through his thing as a rookie. It's kind of a blank slate as far as a roster building. They have a couple interesting young pieces, but we kind of knew that. We said like even 2 years ago, it was a roster filled of 78 overall guys on Madden. But that kind of leaves them open to kind of choose their adventure and maybe revamp this team and what they want to do. And they have plenty of draft capital to kind of work with that too. They need players, but they got a good head coach that I really, if we said coordinator success, you have no idea, but it's like, if you're willing to bet on a guy, this is a guy I would be betting on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that's kind of how I put it.
We never know who's going to shift to this job. Well, who's going to take to it, but his resume is as good and he is as promising of a candidate as you could possibly build from that coordinator pool and from that coordinator route. And the fact that the Texans and where they were over the last 2 years are the ones that landed him, I think is a huge win for Houston, all things considered. All right.
Absolutely.
That's all we got.
I guess we got to talk about the Texans this year. Listen,
give me a reason to talk about you. Okay,
I would love to.
You are now taking yourself seriously, so I will also take you seriously. Yes. If you are showing me that you're not pressing sim to end on a season, then I won't press sim to end on your season.
Help me, help you, help me.
Yes,
that's what it is.
Is that unreasonable? Like no. Now that you have shown a level of seriousness about what you're trying to accomplish, I will engage with that pursuit.
That's what's been great. Actually, I was just saying great, but like Texas fans kind of like get it. Like they're always like, yeah, I know, I understand. I've seen you guys reply to me on Twitter. Sometimes you're like, no, I understand why you said that. Like, I'm like, okay, thanks.
So beaten down those poor people.
Acceptance. Like that they just accepted what they were after a certain point. But I like that. So I'm hoping for good things down in Houston.
Awesome. All right. That is all we got, guys. Thank you for coming up with us and hanging out. Nice little random live show on a Tuesday afternoon in January. We will be back, me and you, on Monday. Yes. So obviously no preview podcast going into this weekend because there's nothing to preview. No recap podcast because there's nothing to recap. But we will have a Super Bowl related show coming to you guys on Monday. And we'll be together on Monday.
Yeah.
We'll be in Phoenix for the Super Bowl. I get in Sunday. You get in a little bit after that. Very excited to have all of us hang out for the week. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming your guys' way. If you have not, please submit a question for the mailbag that I'm doing with Mitchell Schwartz later this week. We're recording on Thursday afternoon, so please get your questions in by, I don't know, say first thing Thursday morning, like 9 a.m. Eastern. athleticfootballshow@gmail.com is where you can send those in. Feel free to ask about whatever's on your mind.
Yeah.
In the meantime, really appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you later.